church secretary stunned the picturesque rural community of Springfield Township, Pennsylvania.
This kind of crime is sort of unheard of for this area.
Shootings, they don't happen in Springfield Township. No, they just don't. That's cow country. You go up there for a nice Sunday drive with your wife.
They say that about every town a murder's committed in. It just don't happen there.
In church,
Sadly, it
a fact that caught
does.
the attention of reporters from as far away as Philadelphia and Allentown.
Everything stopped. And we said, wait, a church? This happened in a church?
Anyone killed in Springfield, that would be a news
Of
story.
course, a
It's
lot
very
happens
big.
in churches.
It's a very big deal.
It's such a horrifying.
There are good
thing.
ones, but
But was it a crime? As the word spread and the congregation began to gather outside the sanctuary on that cold winter
you can't send your kids to church
several
anymore. You
members
can't send them
relayed
to
the details of
school.
Rhonda's troubled
Can't even
life
send them to
to
the store.
investigators.
The victim had a long history of depression.
Rhonda Smith had a history of being bipolar, and had contemplated suicide in the past.
And out in the chilly parking lot, church members wondered, was it possible
Oops.
that Rhonda had followed through on those dark thoughts?
It wasn't that far-fetched to think that, well, maybe she shot herself.
Surely this has got to be a suicide.
But that's not what the evidence inside the church suggested.
There was no gun found at the scene.
And the next day, during the autopsy on Rhonda's body, the medical examiner made another discovery that argued against suicide.
There were 2 gunshot wounds.
This was no suicide. This was in fact a murder.
And based on the slugs recovered during the autopsy, she'd been killed with a .38 caliber handgun.
The bullets went through Rhonda Smith's brain.
Even more disturbing, the powder burns on the backs of Rhonda's hands suggested she'd known what was coming, that she died while trying to shield her face from the killer.
We knew that we had a cold-blooded murderer.
But what about the murderer's identity? The crime scene yielded almost no information.
We were not able to get fingerprints of any substance that would further along the investigation.
All the investigators knew, based on the search history of the computer Rhonda had been working on that morning, was roughly the time that the murder occurred, a little before 11 a.m.
She's on the computer and suddenly everything ceases.
So, hoping for answers, the investigators turned to the people who had known Rhonda best.
The focus started turning into, let's talk to people in the church. Maybe they know something.
The days following Rhonda's murder had been trying for the congregation of Trinity Evangelical Lutheran.
After Rhonda is killed in the church, the congregation comes together. They're grieving, they're mourning.
But when the investigators started asking congregation members about the murder, they had few answers.
Nobody knew what had happened.
And the church members feared the worst.
They didn't know if there was a maniac on the loose or who had done this.
The congregation is terrified at this point.
You're afraid for your children and for yourself and your family.
65-year-old Mary Jane Fonder, interviewed after choir practice on the evening of February 6th, sounded especially upset by the murder.
She couldn't think of anything else but Rhonda Smith. She kept having nightmares about Rhonda's murder.
She liked Rhonda Smith, and she was horrified at the killing.
She also told the investigators that she would always remember exactly where she'd been when she first heard the news that Rhonda was dead.
She had been in Quakertown at the hairdresser's.
And like most people, when the investigators asked Mary Jane if she had any idea who might have murdered Rhonda, she said no.
Rhonda Smith was an amazing, beautiful person. She was a sweet soul.
Most of the rest of the congregation told similar stories to the investigators, and many were especially saddened by the fact that Rhonda had died, just as things finally appeared to be going her way.
She was just about at the point where she was getting it together and was finally going to be able to have some happiness.
In fact, several members of the congregation mentioned that Rhonda had recently started dating again, although a few added a detail that immediately caught the investigators' attention.
She had been seeing several men, including some married men.
Was it possible that Rhonda's personal life had provided the killer's motive?
We didn't know if it was a lover of Rhonda's. Is it a jealous wife?
Could have been any of them that killed Rhonda that day.
It was the investigators' first promising lead.
The police were looking into Rhonda Smith's background, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends.
But when the investigators tracked down Rhonda's boyfriends, their promising lead quickly turned into a dead end.
They had alibis, or they didn't really have any motive to kill her.
Detectives were very frustrated.
Police were really spinning their wheels a little bit on trying to figure out who had done it.
But even as the investigators were struggling, the congregation and all of Springfield Township were beginning to lose patience.
They have no evidence, no motive, and no suspect. It frightens this little town.
For a community in which everybody feels safe and secure, suddenly they're thrust into a horrifying situation with, for lack of a better word, a killer on the loose.
Desperate for a lead, the investigators went back to the pastor and made one last attempt to uncover something at the church.
They were like, is there anything that you can think of that could maybe help us find a lead into who did this, no matter how trivial it might seem to you?
And that's when a strange thing occurred.
They found Pastor Streets really reluctant to talk about it.
Was it simply a reluctance to speak ill of anyone in his congregation?
This guy, pastor, he doesn't want to talk about anybody. He loves them all.
Or, as the investigators
Bet he
suspected,
does.
was there more to it than that?
They knew something was going on, and they pushed him a little bit.
And after a little pushing, the pastor admitted that there was someone who came to mind.
He told the police there was this woman who he thought
Oops.
was acting a little bit off. The woman had been acting strangely.
And according to the pastor, this woman was, just like Rhonda, a devoted member of the church congregation.
Mary Jane Fonder.
Coming up, Mary Jane's secret desire is revealed.
She says, you can't deny what's going on between us.
But is it a motive for murder?
They'll probably never know the whole truth.
Relationship with the pastor.